Cowardice is described as the lack of courage to face danger, difficulty, opposition, or pain. It is defined by excessive, paralyzing fear that prevents a person from taking necessary risk or doing what is right and expected, making it the direct opposite of bravery. I recently just watched Obsession, and I love this movie. I am very obsessed with this movie. I've got a couple videos playing for it because it is just that good. And I think it's one of those movies that having a rewatch of it is always great, because you're gonna notice like things as it happens, right? You're gonna notice things you didn't notice in your first time watching it. You're gonna see things that, they might not have made sense before, but you get it now when you watch it. And I think sorry. And part of that comes from its characters, right? The movie is a very well kept and small movie in the sense that it doesn't have a lot of characters running around. And out of the characters that are running around, there's only two that are really expanded on. Honestly, one, but the second one is a lot more subtle with their expansions on them. And part of that is Bear. He is such a fun character because, he's at first kind of brought on to be like a real sympathetic character. He's going through something that most people have gone through, right? And it's great to see how the movie kind of shows you that, no, he's not a good person, right? He is consistently messing things up for not just himself, but everyone around him. And part of what makes him a bad person is his cowardice, right? It's funny because cowardice is in a lot of people, right? Everybody has some form of cowardice, whether it's with an opportunity, with a job, with a sport, with a person. People all the time hesitate to do things that they know they should do, simply because it's going to be really difficult. It's going to have some feelings of discomfort to do this thing, even though it's going to be best for you in the long run, right? That short-term comfort is so enticing to somebody when you see how, even though it has great long-term effects, it's not going to be fun at first, right? Whether that's going to do a conversation or going to go tell something to your parents or your loved ones that is going to hurt them, but you have to get it off your chest, right? And it's something that I've gone through. I go through it a lot in life, and it's such a hard thing to fight because you don't even really realize it when you do it until later. You're like, oh, I shouldn't have done it like that. You sit there and you realize that, man, the only way I'm really going to get by in life is if I kind of face these fears, right? And they're so difficult to do it. They're so hard to do it. William Shakespeare once said that cowards die many times before their deaths. The valiant never taste of death but once. And when you look at that, it's true. As a coward, when you don't face something head on, you die a little bit inside. You lose a little bit of respect for yourself because you're not afraid to take a chance, right? And it sucks. And I think Obsession was a great way to show it. I think Obsession really showed it super well with its main character, Bear. So the whole movie kind of hinges on Bear's cowardice and how his cowardice kind of kills his opportunity to, get the things that he wants in life. And that happens to be Nikki, right? It isn't just Nikki, but it also seems like he wants a relationship with somebody that loves him for who he is. Somebody that will stand by him through all the crap, because you can tell he's a very flawed person. He's somebody who really doesn't see a future for himself. And he's one of those people where his future for himself seems to be hinging on being something for someone else. The movie's entire premise is set in place by a baseline level of his cowardice, and that's only because he can't confess to Nikki, which really isn't bad because it's something that happens to a lot of people, right? I've gone through this. I'm pretty sure most people you can ask about have gone through this. It's so hard to have that conversation and tell somebody that I really do like you in this way, right? But we see kind of how his cowardice kind of creeps up more and more, and how it just kind of grows more and more with different issues that happen, right? We also see the cowardice with how he can't really push back on Ian, and how he says, oh, don't do this, don't do that, even though when you really look back at it, you honestly, Barry, your first thought was pretty good. So I kind of wanted to go through it. You see a lot of examples. I've got a lot of examples right now, and I'm probably missing more, right? Shoot, one just came to mind. How it's not the traditional form of cowardice, but when he comes home and sees that his cat Sandy died, almost forgot it, I almost said Sydney, Sandy died. You kind of see how he like doesn't really like take responsibility for it, because he's like, oh, you got into these, and it's like, come on, man, we both know that cat didn't find those, just happen to find those pills. That's you have to face that conversation with yourself, that it's your fault that you did this, right? You know, how he's not really able to move on well, because it seems like his whole house that he inherited from his passed away grandmother, he doesn't really change much of it. He just kind of leaves it how it is, and he doesn't put his own spin on it, how he's reluctant to open up to other people. So I'm going to kind of go into it. He doesn't really set his foot down on trivia night to stay home and properly grieve his cat, right? As soon as Nikki calls him, he just immediately just kind of folds, right? And, you know, you really don't notice it on the first watch, but yeah, that's part of it. Like being able to set your foot down and say, you know, I know you want me here, but it's not for me right now. It would be best for me to stay home, right? And that's part of it, right? How, you know, how it's a little late, but how he can't just really cancel the wish at first, right? He doesn't. When you see that he like goes to cancel the wish, he doesn't even say, can I cancel this wish? He says, can I alter it a little bit, right? How throughout the whole time he knows something's wrong with Nikki, even from the beginning. Like you can tell something's wrong with Nikki. Anybody that with any common sense would be like, yeah, something's up. He doesn't really go to seek help. He doesn't tell everybody a full story. I remember when after the first night that he stayed with Nikki, right, which is another thing, him not just setting his foot down and sending her home, right? You know, which you can forgive, I guess, but not really though. How when he goes to Ian the next day, I'm like, oh man, you should just tell him everything, right? And he doesn't. He doesn't tell him about the One Wish Willow. Which at first you think, oh well, I mean, how is he supposed to know? But when you think about it, you're like, okay, you should, like, that should be kind of ringing alarm bells in your head, that as soon as you broke that little thing, all of a sudden all of this is happening, right? Like, come, right? But you forgive it because you're like, okay, you know what? For us, it makes sense, but for him, maybe it doesn't, right? And then you see there's red flags that kind of show up every time, and, you know, and then, true, even when they're talking, you can kind of tell, like, Freaky Nikki is how I refer to her. She doesn't have the same, she might have the same memories in a sense, but she doesn't remember certain things that regular Nikki should. She doesn't, he'll make references to things or stuff like that, and she just won't get it, right? You could tell this is not the same person, right? And then, you know how she tells him that her dad is dying of cancer, he gets called and told, no, he isn't, it's a lie. And he, you know, he tries to confront her about it, and as soon as she makes any uncomfortable, you know, reaction to it, he immediately just folds, right? There's a meme going on TikTok how he'll tell Nikki, he'll be like, yo, don't do this, and then she'll be like, oh, I'll let you, you know, and then he just immediately like throws it away. He's like, oh, never mind, okay, it's not that big of a deal, right? How when she first makes the shrine of Sandy, he's like, he kind of just blows it over, you know, right? He doesn't push back at all. He doesn't push back against Freaky Nikki at all. He doesn't really do anything long lasting, right? He kind of just gives in every time she makes any sort of like response, right? You know, how he doesn't seek help from anybody until it's far too late, right? You notice it's also physical too, you know, whenever there's anything happening physically, he just kind of cowers into and he retreats into himself, right? I think the biggest examples are at the party, right? As soon as Nikki like kind of comes back for a second and starts hitting herself with the bottle, everybody else around him is kind of like screaming at him like, Bear, help, Bear, do something, Bear, get up. And he just kind of sits there, and you kind of hear the sounds be muffled, right? You see how he just kind of like sits there and lets it happen, how he just kind of goes away, if that makes sense. And also, I think also when Sarah dies, right, he sits there in shock, which is fair, right? Which is fair. I think the party's a better example, but you know, he kind of sits there in shock and just lets it happen. He doesn't even really respond about it until later when he's on his own, right? Which you can attribute to shock, but I also see it as another form of his cowardice, right? How he doesn't do anything. How even when Sarah texted him, he didn't tell her, like, no, you should stay away for your own good, right? How when he gets to the car, he doesn't even say anything about it, right? How it seems how he's very easy to just fold for her, knowing that Nikki's at home, right? You know, he doesn't do anything there. With Ian, right? It doesn't happen as much with Ian, but again, like, he doesn't really set his foot down unless he's being like thoroughly attacked, right? If you notice, the only times he really like does any sort of standing up for himself is when people that he know are like making him feel insecure about something, right? When it's when Nikki kind of says, "Oh, I'm not saying you took advantage of me," he's like, "No, I didn't take advantage of you," and he gets really defensive about it, right? Or how Ian is all like, "Yeah, I think you're kind of taking advantage of her, like she's obviously going through something." He's like, "No, I'm not, dude," you know, and he seems to get real defensive about that, but nothing else really, right? And it's crazy when you notice it. It's like, wow, like, and you see it come up as much as it does, and it happens over and over again, right? How at the very end he can't even shoot himself, right? I remember somebody pointed this out earlier. It's more of a feminine thing to kill yourself with pills. I don't agree. I never even heard about that, but apparently that's what somebody said. And he can't shoot himself, and it makes sense because there's more agency in doing it, right? With pills, you just kind of pop them, which he's most likely used to, as he most likely does use a lot of medication. You could just pop them and then just let it happen, right? It doesn't feel any different from taking Tylenol. You're just taking a bunch of them, right? Well, with a gun, you have to pull that trigger, and that trigger can feel really heavy in that situation, right? There's just enough pressure from it where you can't just do it, right? You have to really do it. You can even tell how he was kind of like trying to find the quickest way to just kill himself, right? He was going for his brain, trying to feel around where he should point the gun at, or going at his heart, you know what I'm saying, before he just kind of chickens out from it, right? How he couldn't even think to do anything like that until the very end. You know, when Nikki asks him to kill her, he doesn't kill her. He doesn't even say, you know, it was crazy because in the time I was thinking, oh man, you know, if that was me, I'd be like, I'm sorry, I can't kill you, right? Not because I don't want to, because it's like, you're my friend, or, you know, I love you. That's not what he says. He says, what's so bad about being with me? Craziest thing. I feel like that's them trying to be really in your face, like he's the villain of this story. Like, I know maybe people were like, oh, maybe this is the point where he became the villain. Like, he became the villain a lot earlier in the story in my eyes, but this is the point where, like, you need to understand this guy is the bad guy of this story. He is the clear villain, right? You know, it's crazy. Like, that's such a crazy line, right? And also at the end, you see he tried to make himself throw up the pills, even though knowing that would have allowed freaky Nikki to stay there, right? So, and if it wasn't for her wish, he would have done it too, which is crazy again. So even at the very end, when he knows that this is really the only real solution, he decides still to kill himself. He decides, I still can't do it, right? And it's crazy because through different interviews, Indy Navarrete said how Nikki would have gave him a chance if he asked her out. So it's like, wow. So it's like his cowardice for not asking her out really messed up, because he could have got a shot. Or even if she did say no, he could have probably eventually ended up with Sarah, who clearly liked him, right? Nikki, who I like to point out as like a perfect foil to Bear, was not a coward, right? She was somebody who actively wanted to do things in her life, who kind of did things on her own time, right? How you can see it a lot. And, you know, I didn't even write this down, but in her first interactions, she's kind of shown to be the person who would immediately do exactly what she thinks is right? Part of the definition of cowardice is paralyzing fear that prevents a person from taking necessary risk or doing what is right. And she immediately goes over, gives money to a homeless person, and has a little discussion with them. How even when Ian tries to be like, oh, come on, let's go to karaoke, she's like, no, I want to go home. You know, I feel like in that situation, Bear would be like, nah, sure, I guess I'll stay out, right? Well, she's somebody who isn't letting her cowardice kill her opportunities, right? How she quit, how she was putting her 2 weeks in her job, not much of a plan. I mean, she had a plan, but as somebody in the creative field, it's like, that's so risky to just kind of put all your eggs in that basket, but it's so respectable, right? how she just said, I can't do it here. She was like, I need to find love. I need to, you know, do things like this, right? And I think she's like the perfect way to show like how cowardice doesn't kill opportunity, right? But how the people around you could, you know. But yeah, and it happens in real life, as I said before. You know, people don't lose or miss opportunities because they fail, but because they never actually tried. Yeah. But thank you guys for listening. I know it's been a while. I don't know why. Honestly, no excuse. I just didn't make a video. But thank you guys for listening, watching, however you are experiencing this. And I'll be back soon. We'll make another obsession video because I am in love with this movie, man. I love this movie. It's such a great movie. It's almost perfect, dude. Nah, fuck it, I'll say it's perfect. It's a great movie. It's a great movie. It's fun. It's fun. It's great. Great characters. Bear's a great character. I think his name's Michael Johnson. He's kind of getting lost because his co-star just happens to be not only one of the best acting performances of the year. She's also a really attractive person. He's getting lost because he was terrific in this movie. I think he's playing Cyclops in X-Men 97 season 92, which is great for him. Like, I love it. Megan Lawless was great. I forget Ian's actor's name. Sorry. I'll look it up right now, dude. Cooper Tomlinson. I knew that too. I forgot. But they were all great in this movie. They were all great. They played their characters super well, and I'm gonna make a couple videos on this movie. But again, thank you guys so much for listening or watching, and I will see you all next time.